Hello number ones, welcome back to my channel. This is the Metatron speaking. Today we're going to talk about one of my favorite historical topics, Norman England. Norman England is not a new topic on my channel. In fact, I've got a video on taxation in Norman England, link in the description below. However, today we will talk about agriculture, trade and towns. The agricultural economy revolved mostly around wheat. This was the crop which was grown for preference by lords on their domains and by peasants for sale. The peasants themselves often grew more rye, oats and barley. This was partly because the lord had the better land, equipment and labour supply, but also because of the easy trade in wheat. A typical peasant in the developed medieval village held 10 to 15 acres of arable land. There were cottagers with only perhaps 5 acres, and there were also wealthy villeins with several vergets of land, 30 acres or more. The typical holding was just enough to feed the family and pay the various feudal dues and taxes. In a good year, and when there were no sudden extra impositions from the king or courts, a peasant might be able to live a little better or put some money by. In a bad year, people went hungry. Earlier in the period, a half or more of the peasants in England owned less than 10 acres of land. Such smallholders had to supplement their produce with other sources of income and turn their hands to industrial pursuits. Their wives became spinners and weavers if there was such work, and many found employment as agricultural labourers, performing seasonal tasks such as harvesting, winnowing, maintaining farm buildings, and so on. Young men, not needed to work at home, sought employment as full-time labourers elsewhere, particularly by wealthy villeins with too much land to work on their own. This ability to employ manual resources gave these men the chance to extend their holdings even further, particularly since they were better able to raise crops for sale rather than having to grow produce for their own consumption. The economy of Norman England was predominantly agricultural. Grain was grown on almost every acre that could be ploughed, and cattle was grazed in fens and woodland. Under the feudal system, many peasants who had been freeholders now had to pay rent with crippling proportions of their produce, who had to spend so much time into their lord's estate that they had little time to provide for their families. Later, in the Norman period, the population grew, money was in greater supply, and the burden of feudal dues and service diminished. The English exported tin, lead and silver, all mined in this country. They also exported slaves, cloth, wool, grain and other agricultural produce. The trade was carried on by merchants from the Frisian Islands, from Normandy, and even by English merchants travelling abroad. There were a number of industrial areas in England. Tin was mined in Cornwall, iron in the Forest of Dean and West Yorkshire, and coal in Newcastle and Yorkshire. The coasts had salt houses and supported fishermen, while forests had their charcoal burners. Often associated with them was the manufacture of iron goods, in such places as Sussex, Coventry, Yorkshire and Dean. Clothworking was the other major industrial specialty, found in villages in hilly areas, where sheep were kept as there was little good arable land and the pasture not adequate for cattle. Although by far the largest proportion of the population were engaged in growing foodstuffs, some of these combined this with another occupation, and a small but not insignificant number were employed in trade and industry. The rural occupations were more important to the economy, the secondary jobs of agricultural labourers and smallholders. These included carpenters, tilers, thatchers and masons, skinners, tanners, toyers and saddlers. There were also spinners, weavers, fullers, dyers and shearers in the cloth trade, and also smiths, coopers, carters, wrights, potters and so on. A very interesting topic when talking about Norman England is that of towns. You see, under Saxon rule, towns weren't particularly important, but under the Normans, the situation changed completely, because the Normans gave or brought a greater importance to trade, hence to towns at the same time. But there were many other reasons why towns developed and flourished during the Norman time, and one of which was the military protection under the new stone-built castles and walls. The reason why I like towns is also because when you imagine towns in Norman England, well, you have to consider the fact that first off, most towns would be walled, most towns would have a wall. But when you imagine the houses, then around the houses you would have orchards, farmyards. It was very rural. Towns had officials and raised communal chests to pay for guardsmen and defences. The officials also oversaw local monopolies, which made sure that burgesses got their privileges they paid for, and outsiders were prevented from trading or limited in the scope of their commercial activities. London was the only really urban centre with a population of 35 to 40,000. Other towns included York, 10,000, Bristol, 9,000, Coventry, 7,200, Norwich, 6,000, Lincoln, 5,200, and at 4,000 inhabitants, Salisbury, Lynn, Colchester, Boston, Beverley, Newcastle, Canterbury, St Edmunds, Oxford, etc. Other smaller towns, such as Hereford, Nottingham, and Cambridge, numbered around 2,000 to 3,000. Many of these towns are detailed in entries in the Domesday Book of 1086. Alright then, I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, please remember thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more content from the Metatron. I will soon go to Czech Republic. Yes, I will spend some time in Prague, and of course I will make some daily vlog, well, maybe not daily, but I will make some vlog from there, and perhaps I will make also some videos if I manage to find some museums or any medieval area of relevance. So make sure to stay tuned. Also, because I'm working on a big production for a Viking video, part of which will be filmed in Sweden. Thank you very much for watching, and remember, the Metatron has spread his wings. Goodbye. The rural occupations were more important to the economy, the secondary jobs of agricultural occupation and smallholders. La ridico un attimo perché ero un pochino esitante. The secondary jobs of agricultural laborers. Secondary jobs of agricultural laborers, ok, proviamo. The rural occupations were more important to the economy. Well, the secondary job... Sì, vabbè.
A parte in bianco e nero
Sì, no, ma mi sa che la metto alla fine questa, sì, la metto, vado. The agricultural economy revolved mostly around wheat. This was the crown... Check 2. No, lascia prendere. 5, 4. The agricultural economy revolved mostly around wheat. This was the crop which was grown for preference by lords on their domains and by peasants for sale. Stop! So stanno facendo i miei vicini, ma...